My wife said, "It's fine," and I believed her. That was my first mistake, because it's fine doesn't mean fine. It's fine means something has already gone wrong, and now I'm being tested to see how aware I am of it. And I'm not. I've never been. I heard "it's fine" and thought, great, we're done here. Conversation over. Problem solved. Turns out that sentence is more like the opening scene of a movie where the main character has no idea what genre he's in. The tone alone should have warned me. She didn't yell it. She didn't say it happily. She said it calmly, which is the most dangerous way to say anything. Calm means she's already replayed the entire situation in her head, including all the versions where I handled it correctly. None of those versions happened. I'm standing there like I just passed a test. I didn't study for smiling, thinking confidence might count as knowledge. I asked, "You sure?" which I thought was mature. Apparently, that question means I'm challenging her statement like it's up for debate, because now I've turned "it's fine" into a courtroom situation. She said, "Yes, it's fine." Same words, different meaning. The second time felt heavier, like gravity increased in the room. Even the furniture knew something was wrong. The couch was uncomfortable. The air felt judgmental. At this point, I had two choices: keep talking or stop talking. Smart. I chose a secret third option, which is saying words while not knowing what they mean. I started explaining things. Nobody asked for explanations. Explanations are gasoline. I thought clarity would help. It never does. Clarity is just me admitting I didn't understand the problem the first time. I'm walking through my reasoning like it's impressive, like she's going to stop me and say, "Wow, never thought about it incorrectly before." She didn't interrupt me, which again felt polite but wasn't. Silence isn't agreement. Silence is her letting me finish so she can remember everything I said later. I could tell by her nodding. Not agreeing nods, recording nods. These are the nods of someone saving files. Meanwhile, I'm building confidence because nobody has stopped me yet. That's how I know I'm losing. Then she says, "I just think it's interesting," and nothing good has ever followed that sentence. Interesting is what you say when you don't have the energy to argue, but you still want credit for noticing the issue. Tried to laugh it off. Comedy felt like the right move. I made a joke. It landed somewhere behind us. I could feel it miss. Even I didn't like it, and I said it. I started apologizing for things I wasn't sure happened. General apologies. Blanket apologies. "I'm sorry if anything I did made you feel." And she stopped me right there. Stopping someone mid-apology is powerful. That's like canceling the exit ramp. Now I'm still on the highway, but slower. Everyone's watching. She said, "You don't have to apologize," which means I absolutely do. Now it has to be the right one. I tried to fix it practically. Solutions. Men love solutions. Solutions say, "Let's move forward," while ignoring that we never understood the problem. I suggested we just reset. Fresh start. New day. She looked at me like I'd asked her to delete a memory. You can't reset a situation that already happened. That's not how time works. If it were, I'd be undefeated in arguments. By now, I'm fully aware something is wrong. I don't know what it is. I'm searching my recent history like a computer freezing up. Did I say something? Did I not say something? Was it the way I said nothing? I start replaying the last 24 hours, then 48, then our entire relationship, connecting dots that don't exist, convincing myself the issue might be something from 2014. She says, "Forget it," which is a trap disguised as mercy. Forgetting it means remembering it later, at a time I won't be prepared for. I nodded like I understood, but I didn't move. You don't leave a room after, forget it. You stay still. Movement looks suspicious. I stood there waiting for instructions that were never coming, realizing that it's fine. Wasn't the end of the conversation. It was just the part where I was supposed to already know what I did. Explain it correctly, feel the right amount of sorry, and somehow make it better without asking another question. People don't realize how dangerous normal sentences are until they're already standing inside one. A phrase like, it's fine, sounds small, polite, almost helpful. And that's what makes it terrifying. There's no warning label on it. Nobody tells you that those two words can quietly change the temperature of an entire room. You hear them and assume they mean what they say because that's how words are supposed to work. But everyday phrases don't follow the same rules. They carry tone, history, memory, and expectations that were never explained. The moment you take them literally, you've already misunderstood the situation. The comedy lives in the gap between what the phrase sounds like and what it actually means. On the surface, it's fine, feels like permission to move on. It feels like closure. Your brain checks the box and relaxes because you think the problem has been resolved. But underneath that delivery is an entirely different message being sent, one that you're expected to decode without asking questions. The humor comes from treating that tiny phrase as if it's harmless while slowly realizing it's operating on a completely different emotional level than you are. What makes it funny is not anger or conflict, but confusion. There's no yelling, no dramatic reaction, just the quiet awareness that you've missed something important and don't know when it happened. You start replaying the sentence in your head, focusing on the way it was said instead of what was said, the pause before it. The eye contact, the lack of eye contact. Suddenly the phrase isn't small anymore. It feels heavy, like it's been carrying meaning for hours before it ever reached you. This is where the exaggeration works without sounding exaggerated. You're not claiming the phrase is evil or dramatic. You're reacting to it like someone who's been given responsibility without instructions. You begin assigning weight to every syllable, wondering if the emphasis was on it or on fine, and why that matters even though it shouldn't. They're smart. The audience recognizes this immediately because they've been there. They know that moment where a casual sentence turns into a situation and no one officially announces it. The professional rhythm comes from staying calm while your thoughts spiral. You don't rush the moment. You let it sit. You describe the way the room feels different even though nothing changed. You treat the phrase like it has rules everyone else learned early in life. You're only now discovering that there was a class you missed. That slow realization creates tension without aggression, which keeps people listening because it feels honest instead of forced. Confidence is the most dangerous emotion when it shows up without information. That's where the humor lives. You're not unsure. You're not hesitant. You're fully committed to an understanding you do not have. And they're smart. You step into the moment believing you've got it handled, not because you've thought it through, because nothing has stopped you yet. That kind of confidence feels earned even when it isn't. The audience recognizes it immediately because they've felt it themselves. The funny part isn't being wrong. It's being wrong comfortably. You're relaxed in your opinion. You say things with certainty, not realizing certainty requires evidence you never collected. You explain your position like it's obvious. Anyone listening should be impressed by how clear it all is in your head. Meanwhile, every word you say quietly confirms that you missed the point earlier, and you don't know that yet. That delay between confidence and awareness is where the tension builds. This style works because the confidence doesn't come from arrogance, it comes from assumption. You assumed the situation was simple. You assumed the rules were the same ones you already knew. You assumed no update was necessary. The audience laughs because they know assumptions are comfortable right up until they collapse. Watching someone stand confidently on something unstable is endlessly relatable. The delivery stays steady. You don't hint that you might be wrong. You commit fully. You double down. You add details that support your version of events, even though those details only make sense to you. From your perspective, you're being logical. From the outside, you're building an argument on a foundation that doesn't exist. That disconnect keeps people engaged because they're watching confidence outrun understanding in real time. Doesn't crack right away. It stretches across multiple thoughts, multiple explanations. You say things like, you solved the issue, like this was never complicated to begin with. They're smart. The audience stays with you because they know the realization is coming, but they don't know when. Every confident sentence delays it just a little longer, increasing the payoff without ever delivering it. Professionally, the rhythm relies on letting the confidence speak for itself. You don't mock it. You don't point it out. You trust the listener to hear the certainty and recognize the flaw. That trust creates connection. You sound reasonable, measured, even helpful, while unknowingly moving further away from the actual problem. The calm assurance makes the eventual misunderstanding feel inevitable rather than exaggerated. What deepens the engagement is that the confidence feels justified in the moment. There's no warning sign, no dramatic shift, just a steady belief that you're on the right track because nobody has corrected you yet. Silence feels like agreement. Neutral reactions feel like validation. You interpret everything as confirmation. Each interpretation pushes you further into the wrong conclusion. The audience doesn't laugh because you're foolish. They laugh because they've stood in that same space, confident for no real reason, explaining something that made perfect sense only to them. They're smart. They stay listening because confidence without understanding isn't loud or explosive. It's quiet and convincing. The longer it goes uninterrupted, the more compelling it becomes to watch it continue, knowing it hasn't reached the moment where it realizes it never knew what was going on in the first place. The audience isn't waiting to laugh at the phrase. They're waiting to see how deeply you misunderstand it, because they know where this is going, even if you don't. Every sentence adds another layer to the misunderstanding. Another assumption made with confidence. The phrase keeps getting smaller in wording, but larger in consequence. That imbalance is what drives the humor forward, pulling the listener deeper into a moment that started with two harmless words and now feels like something you're going to be thinking about for the rest of the day. There's something suspicious about calmness when you know you shouldn't be calm. That's where the comedy starts. The voice stays steady, the body doesn't move, everything on the outside looks reasonable, but inside it's absolute chaos. Thoughts are overlapping, alarms are going off, and none of them are loud enough to justify reacting. That contrast is the engine. The audience hears a relaxed delivery and slowly realizes it doesn't match what's happening internally, and that mismatch pulls them in because it feels honest. The calm tone gives the impression of control, even when there is none. You describe the situation like it's manageable, like you're still part of the conversation, while your mind is already 10 steps ahead trying to predict outcomes that haven't happened yet. The humor comes from refusing to acknowledge the panic directly. Instead of saying you're nervous, you describe the physical stillness, the pauses, the careful word choices, as if staying calm might somehow fix the situation on its own. What makes this style work is restraint. You don't rush to the funny part. You let the calmness linger longer than it should. You speak slowly, as if slowing time might help you catch up to whatever you missed. Meanwhile, the audience can feel the panic building underneath because they've experienced it themselves. I recognize that moment when you're outwardly composed, but internally rewriting the last 5 minutes of your life, looking for the exact second everything shifted. The internal panic doesn't explode, it leaks. It shows up in overthinking tone, timing, and meaning. You're calm enough to notice details that don't matter, like how long someone paused before responding or how normal the room feels despite the tension. Those details become evidence in your mind that something is wrong, even though nothing obvious has happened. The audience laughs because they know that feeling of being emotionally alert while pretending everything is fine. Each sentence sounds reasonable on its own, but together they paint a picture of someone quietly unraveling. You don't announce the anxiety, you let it slip through observations. You mention how you're standing still longer than necessary. Heart! How you're choosing words carefully even though you don't know what you're trying to say. Calm delivery becomes a disguise. The audience keeps listening to see how long it can hold. Professional rhythm comes from confidence in the pause. Silence becomes part of the joke. You let thoughts hang without resolving them, trusting the listener to fill in the tension. The calmness gives you permission to stretch moments that would normally pass quickly. A glance, a sigh, a short response suddenly feels loaded, and you explore that weight without ever raising your voice. The panic is never addressed directly because addressing it would end the tension. Instead, it stays just under the surface, growing stronger as the calm continues. You sound reasonable while describing unreasonable thoughts. That contradiction keeps the audience engaged. They're not waiting for a punchline, they're waiting for the calm to break, knowing it won't, and that quiet expectation keeps them locked in, listening for the moment when the outside finally catches up to what's been happening inside all along. Tension doesn't have to be loud to be effective. In fact, the quiet escalation is what makes it irresistible. You start in a normal situation, a small decision, a tiny comment. Every action after that adds weight without anyone raising their voice. The humor comes from watching someone treat ordinary events as if they carry enormous consequences. You don't need yelling, arguments, or dramatic gestures. The stakes are amplified by thought, assumption, and the subtle reactions of everyone around you. That's where the comedy builds naturally, and the audience leans in because they recognize it from their own experiences. Escalation works best when it's invisible at first. A comment seems innocent. A pause seems normal. But your internal narrative amplifies each moment, and the audience hears it as an expanding tension. You notice details nobody else cares about: the timing of a blink, the way someone shifts in a chair, the faint sound of keys dropping on a counter. Each of these small observations seems mundane, but in your mind, they are evidence that the situation is slowly spiraling out of control. The audience gets the thrill of knowing the scene is escalating while the character appears calm, which creates a perfect mismatch that's inherently funny. The charm of this approach is subtlety. You don't need fireworks or dramatic turns. The situation intensifies through thought alone. You describe what's happening in measured tones while your mind races, noticing contradictions, overanalyzing every reaction, imagining outcomes that don't yet exist. The audience stays attentive because they want to see how much worse things can get without anyone realizing it, because they understand that your calm exterior is only holding back the inevitable chaos. Every small escalation feels earned. Every reaction is a silent alarm that the listener can appreciate. Each moment builds on the previous, and you let it breathe. Pauses are deliberate, letting the audience process what's coming. A glance, a sigh, even the timing of a laugh becomes a vehicle for tension. You hint at the potential disaster without showing it outright, letting listeners imagine the worst while you narrate the ordinary. That interplay between imagination and description is what keeps viewers engaged, because they're participating mentally and emotionally in the unfolding situation. Professional rhythm comes from pacing. You control the escalation like a wave, rising slowly but steadily. You describe every small action and reaction with precision, choosing words that carry implied weight. Even if nothing dramatic occurs, the audience perceives that the stakes are increasing. They are waiting, holding their breath in a quiet way, curious to see when the next minor event will tip the balance. That anticipation is the glue that keeps people watching, because it's human to want to witness the moment when a simple scenario becomes unmanageable. The escalation works best when it's paired with internal commentary. You explain what you think is happening, what you hope will happen, and what might happen, layering anxiety and misunderstanding over calm external behavior. The audience feels the tension through your internal voice, realizing that while nothing seems wrong on the outside, everything is unraveling inside. Each addition, the overthinking, the hesitation, the careful measurement of words adds invisible weight to the scenario. The quiet escalation is more powerful than loud chaos because it feels believable, relatable, and keeps the audience leaning forward, waiting to see exactly how long the calm can last before everything catches up with the reality that's been quietly growing around them. Tension doesn't have to be loud to be effective. In fact, the quiet escalation is what makes it irresistible. You start in a normal situation, a small decision, a tiny comment. Every action after that adds weight without anyone raising their voice. The humor comes from watching someone treat ordinary events as if they carry enormous consequences. You don't need yelling, arguments, or dramatic gestures. The stakes are amplified by thought, assumption, and the subtle reactions of everyone around you. That's where the comedy builds naturally, and the audience leans in because they recognize it from their own experiences. Escalation works best when it's invisible at first. A comment seems innocent. A pause seems normal. But your internal narrative amplifies each moment, and the audience hears it as an expanding tension. You notice details nobody else cares about: the timing of a blink, the way someone shifts in a chair, the faint sound of keys dropping on a counter. Each of these small observations seems mundane, but in your mind, and they're smart, they are evidence that the situation is slowly spiraling out of control. The audience gets the thrill of knowing the scene is escalating while the character appears calm, which creates a perfect mismatch that's inherently funny. The charm of this approach is subtlety. You don't need fireworks or dramatic turns. The situation intensifies through thought alone. You describe what's happening in measured tones while your mind races, noticing contradictions, overanalyzing every reaction, imagining outcomes that don't yet exist. The audience stays attentive because they want to see how much worse things can get without anyone realizing it, because they understand that your calm exterior is only holding back the inevitable chaos. Every small escalation feels earned. Every reaction is a silent alarm that the listener can appreciate. Hooks are embedded in anticipation. Each moment builds on the previous, and you let it breathe. Pauses are deliberate, letting the audience process what's coming. A glance, a sigh, or even the timing of a laugh becomes a vehicle for tension. You hint at the potential disaster without showing it outright, letting listeners imagine the worst while you narrate the ordinary. That interplay between imagination and description is what keeps viewers engaged, because they're participating mentally and emotionally in the unfolding situation. Professional rhythm comes from pacing. You control the escalation like a wave, rising slowly but steadily. You describe every small action and reaction with precision, choosing words that carry implied weight. Even if nothing dramatic occurs, the audience perceives that the stakes are increasing. They are waiting, holding their breath in a quiet way, curious to see when the next minor event will tip the balance. Anticipation is the glue that keeps people watching, because it's human to want to witness the moment when some scenario becomes unmanageable. The escalation works best when it's paired with internal commentary. You explain what you think is happening, what you hope will happen, and what might happen, layering anxiety and misunderstanding over calm external behavior. The audience feels the tension through your internal voice, realizing that while nothing seems wrong on the outside, everything is unraveling inside. Each addition, the overthinking, the hesitation, the careful measurement of words, adds invisible weight to the scenario. The quiet escalation is more powerful than loud chaos because it feels believable, relatable, and keeps the audience leaning forward, waiting to see exactly how long the calm can last before everything catches up with the reality that's been quietly growing around them. Talking too much is the silent trap of comedy, and it sneaks up on you slowly. You start with a simple explanation, thinking it will clarify everything, and suddenly you've entered a loop where every word you speak multiplies the problem instead of solving it. Each sentence seems reasonable at the time, and you feel like progress is being made, but the audience sees the disaster unfolding in real time. The humor comes from the mismatch between your perception and reality, and the tension keeps viewers glued because they know the outcome before you do. They're curious to see how long it will take you to catch up. Explanations feel safe, but they are dangerous. You begin by justifying your actions, describing what you meant, what you intended, and why it made sense to you. That seems logical in isolation, but when strung together, it becomes an overcomplicated confession. You're revealing every detail, every minor thought, every assumption, and the more you speak, the less control you have. The audience recognizes this because they've been there. They've watched someone unravel verbally while thinking they were helping. They can't look away. The comedy comes from confidence mixed with ignorance. You speak with certainty, presenting your reasoning as though it will fix the misunderstanding, when in fact it creates new ones. You're convinced clarity will save you, but clarity is the problem. It exposes the lack of prior understanding. It highlights missteps, and it amplifies the very mistakes you hope to hide. Every word is a trap, a small step deeper into the chaos, and the audience follows eagerly because they can sense the tipping point approaching. You repeat points in slightly different ways, trying to cover all angles. You restate yourself, thinking perhaps the next version will land correctly, but it never does. The pauses, the careful phrasing, the little additions to explain what you've already said, all of it becomes a rhythm the audience anticipates, are watching a slow motion spiral, where each attempt to explain makes the situation more absurd and more compelling to stay tuned. The professional storytelling comes from controlling the pacing. You let the audience in on every thought without revealing the final outcome. You describe your reasoning process as though it is linear, even when it's not, letting the tension build naturally. Listeners engage because they're reading between the lines, noticing the disconnect between what you think you're communicating and what's actually being understood. That disconnect is the core of the humor and keeps the story alive in the minds of the audience. Internal dialogue adds another layer. You're explaining externally while simultaneously questioning yourself internally, creating parallel narratives. The audience experiences the duality, the calm explanations on the surface and the panic underneath, making every sentence richer. Each attempt to clarify, each justification becomes a window into a mind that is trying desperately to fix a situation it never fully understood. The more you speak, the funnier it becomes, because the audience knows that with every word, you are sinking deeper, and they stay engaged, anticipating the next misstep, the next unintended revelation, the next perfectly timed moment of self-inflicted comedy. Unresolved situations are the heartbeat of engagement, and keeping the problem open-ended is where comedy thrives. You present a scenario that feels like it should have a resolution, but the resolution never comes. The audience immediately senses that the story isn't over, and that tension pulls them in. Every pause, every incomplete thought, every hesitation signals that there's more to come, and curiosity keeps them locked in. It's not about finishing the joke. It's about letting the joke live in the space between expectation and reality, where the audience can imagine all the ways it could go wrong. The humor comes from anticipation. You hint at consequences that are likely but never fully reveal them. You describe actions in progress, conversations still unfolding, and reactions that have not reached their peak. This makes the audience feel like they are part of the story. They're waiting alongside the character for the inevitable moment when the calm exterior collapses or the misunderstanding explodes. By not resolving the situation, you create a tension that is almost magnetic, because humans are wired to seek closure, and comedy exploits that desire by delaying it. The professional storytelling comes from layering multiple threads of uncertainty. You don't just leave one question unanswered, you allow several strands of confusion to exist at once. You mentioned prior mistakes, future possibilities, conflicting interpretations of small phrases, and unspoken expectations, all at the same time. The audience juggles these threads in their own mind while listening, creating engagement that goes beyond laughter. They are mentally participating in the scenario, trying to predict outcomes and relate it to their own experiences, which makes the story feel alive and interactive. Hooks are built into the pacing and delivery. You avoid conclusions. You sprinkle hints that something significant is imminent. Small shifts in tone, a pause before speaking, a glance, a repeated phrase, each is a breadcrumb that the audience instinctively follows. These moments are subtle, but they create the sensation that the story could tip in any direction at any second. Viewers remain attentive because the narrative teases them continuously without offering the satisfaction of closure, which is both frustrating and compelling in a way that keeps them watching. The narrative tension is amplified by internal conflict. You describe your thoughts, worries, and anticipations while the external situation remains unresolved. This internal commentary gives the audience access to a perspective that is simultaneously confident and clueless, calm and panicked, methodical and chaotic. Each layer of thought adds complexity to the unresolved scenario, creating a dynamic interplay between expectation and actual events. The audience stays engaged because they are watching a live negotiation between perception and reality, where every sentence could dramatically alter the understanding of what is happening. The unresolved story thrives on relatability. Everyone has been in situations where they don't know the rules, where something seems simple but feels wrong, where they keep explaining themselves to no effect. By leaving the problem open-ended, the story mirrors real life. The audience recognizes themselves in it. This recognition creates a connection, and because the situation is ongoing, viewers can imagine multiple outcomes, continuously re-engaging their attention. The tension, combined with the relatability, ensures that the audience doesn't just listen. They stay hooked, waiting to see how long the calm can last, what missteps will happen next, and how far the misunderstanding will spiral before anyone finally intervenes, keeping them fully invested without ever needing a formal ending. So, in the end, I stood there nodding like I understood everything, while also realizing I understood absolutely nothing. My wife went back to what she was doing. Probably thinking I'd learned a lesson, I went back to wondering if the lesson was hidden somewhere in the couch cushions or taped to the ceiling. And I'll tell you, that's marriage in a nutshell. Tiny phrases that mean way more than they should, confidence that's completely misplaced, the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, next time you'll know what "it's fine" really means before it isn't.